The power of a kind heart. The hospital waiting room was cold and unforgiving. An elderly woman sat hunched in a plastic chair, her frail arms trembling as she held a small bag of her son's belongings. Her eyes were red from crying, her voice barely a whisper, as she turned to the young woman beside her, her son's fiancée. "My arms are tired," she pleaded, her words heavy with exhaustion and grief. The younger woman glanced at her phone, then away, saying nothing. But someone else was watching, a stranger in an expensive suit, a millionaire who would prove that kindness costs nothing but means everything. What happened next would change all of their lives forever and remind us that true wealth isn't measured in money, but in the compassion we show to those who need it most. Before we continue with this incredible story, please take a moment to subscribe to Heartfelt Moments and hit that like button. We share true stories of kindness, hope, and humanity that will restore your faith in people. Drop a comment below telling us about a time someone showed you unexpected kindness. Now, let's get back to this remarkable story. Margaret Chen had been sitting in that hospital corridor for 6 hours. Her son, David, had been in emergency surgery after a terrible car accident on Interstate 95. The doctors had told her it would be a long operation, but nothing could have prepared her for the agonizing wait. At 73 years old, Margaret's arthritis made every movement painful, but the weight of worry pressed down on her even harder than her physical ailments. Beside her sat Brittany, David's fiancée of 8 months. The young woman had arrived an hour after Margaret, her designer handbag matching her outfit perfectly. She'd asked the necessary questions of the nurses, made a few phone calls, and then settled into her chair with her smartphone, scrolling through social media while Margaret sat in silent agony. Margaret clutched the clear plastic bag containing David's wallet, keys, and the watch his late father had given him. Her arms shook with fatigue. The bag wasn't heavy, but she'd been holding it for hours, afraid to set it down, afraid that letting go of her son's belongings somehow meant letting go of him. Her fingers were going numb, her shoulders burning with pain. "Brittany," she whispered, her voice cracking, "my arms are tired. Could you please hold this for a while?" Brittany glanced over, her perfectly manicured nails still tapping at her phone screen. "Can't you just put it on the chair next to you, Margaret?" she said, her tone suggesting the request was an inconvenience. Margaret's eyes filled with fresh tears. She didn't want to put David's things on a dirty hospital chair. She wanted someone who loved her son to hold them, to care about them the way she did. But before she could respond, a deep voice interrupted. "Excuse me, ma'am. May I help?" Both women looked up to see a tall man in his 50s, dressed in an impeccably tailored navy suit. His salt and pepper hair was perfectly styled, and his Italian leather shoes gleamed even under the harsh fluorescent lights. Everything about him spoke of wealth and success. This was James Richardson, a real estate mogul whose face occasionally appeared in the business section of the newspaper. James had been at the hospital visiting a friend when he'd noticed the scene unfolding in the waiting area. He'd watched the elderly woman's shoulders sag under an invisible weight, saw her pleading with the younger woman, witnessed the cold dismissal. "I couldn't help but notice you need some assistance," James said gently, kneeling down to Margaret's eye level despite his expensive suit touching the hospital floor. Margaret looked at this distinguished stranger with confusion and gratitude. My son is in surgery. I've been holding his things, but my arms say no more," James said softly. He carefully took the plastic bag from her trembling hands. "I'll hold these for you, and I'm going to sit right here beside you if that's all right until you need them back." Tears streamed down Margaret's face. "You don't have to do that. You must have important places to be." James settled into the chair on her other side, the plastic bag resting securely in his hands. "There's nowhere more important than right here, with someone who needs a friend." Over the next 3 hours, James sat with Margaret. He listened as she told him about David, about how he'd grown up to be a teacher, how he volunteered at youth centers on weekends, how proud his late father would have been. James held David's belongings as carefully as if they were his own treasures. He fetched Margaret coffee, warm blankets, and even convinced a nurse to bring her some crackers when she mentioned she hadn't eaten all day. Brittany watched this unfold with growing discomfort. She'd seen herself as a good person, yet here was a complete stranger, a wealthy, busy man showing more care for her future mother-in-law than she had. When the surgeon finally emerged with good news, David would make a full recovery, Margaret broke down in relief. James stood with her, steadying her as her knees weakened with emotion. He handed back the plastic bag and Margaret grasped his hand. "Why?" she asked through her tears. "Why would you do this for a stranger?" James smiled, his own eyes glistening. "My mother spent her last days in a hospital, and a stranger sat with her when I couldn't get there in time. I promised myself I'd pay that kindness forward whenever I could. Besides, we're not strangers anymore, Margaret. We're friends." Brittany stood up, shame and realization washing over her. She approached Margaret, and for the first time that day truly saw her. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. "I should have been there for you." Margaret took her hand, offering forgiveness in a single gesture. This story reminds us that kindness doesn't require wealth or status. James Richardson could have walked past that waiting room. He could have assumed someone else would help. Instead, he chose compassion. He saw a fellow human being in pain and decided that her comfort mattered more than his schedule. True kindness is noticing when someone's arms are tired, literally or metaphorically, and offering to share the burden. It's sitting with someone in their darkest hour. It's holding what matters to them as carefully as they would themselves. Today, look around you. Someone's arms are tired. Someone needs a friend. You have the power to be that person. You don't need to be a millionaire to make a millionaire's impact on someone's life.